Actually, I have some Native American connections through my mother, so I'd like to do just a brief thank you to the plants and to the earth, and I'm sure it will reverberate all the way around in a full circle. Winda hey ya, winda hey ya, winda hey, winda hey, hey hey ya ya. So the purpose of my doing this is actually to empower everybody to be able to blend their own teas exactly the way they like. I'm sure you've all read boxes and gotten them in the supermarket and found something that you wound up sitting on the shelf because you didn't like it. And this is a way that you'll be able to mix your own blends to your own taste and also keep track of it. So this particular cup here is actually a photograph I took in Berkeley in the US in California. And it's actually made with fresh flowers, rosemary, spearmint, there's calendula, borage, and pansies in there. It was really quite lovely. But today we're going to work on what I consider to be a set of really safe flowers, ones that you can take every day, probably safer than most caffeine-based ones. Although, being a caffeine imbiber myself, it can be used with that together. Got the right one? So, first thing I want to straighten out is everybody's always going tea, and coffee, and tisane, and what is the right one? General usage is that tea can be used for almost anything that's in a cup with liquid. It's a common term for water infusions. So that includes everything, as I have listed here: flowers, leaves, stems, dried fruits. You can have fruit tea, seeds, bark, roots, tubers. The process for getting liquid out of the tubers and roots and bark is a little different than the flowers. Peels, rinds, and the style in corn silk. But what's in the name? So the oldest name on record, Tumling Tu, is a bitter drink that provides sleep. This is referring to the Camellia sinensis. 16th century, we have the actual word tea as an infusion made from the Camellia sinensis, which we now know as black tea, and also green tea. So what's in a name? The original name Thai tea came from China. And the process was to steep, infuse, decoct, brew, and make tea. And the product, any of those terms is acceptable. So if you were to make your own and you wanted to say it was the Woodfordia tisane or the sleeping potion, you're fully in your rights to do so. Now, today we're going to cover these basic herbs: chamomile, calendula, nettles, and there is a shop here selling nettle tea, already made up. Spearmint, rose, lavender. I don't have oat straw, I'm sorry. Scritch that one. Lemon balm, lemon myrtle, lemon verbena, catnip, horsetail, elder blossoms. That's it. Horsetail's on there twice. It's only once. Energetics. Now, the first thing we want to do is get you in touch with the energetics of your body. So a lot of different flowers, seeds, roots, and barks. Some are warming, some are cooling. That's why you would have summer teas and sort of winter teas. Now, I'm going to ask all of you, if you want to, reach out to your neighbor and just feel your arm and just get a sense of whether you are warm or cool by comparing to them. So if you feel really warm compared to the people on both sides of you, or really cool to people on both sides of you, so when you're generally healthy in the summertime, if you're a hot person, you're going to want cooling teas. And we're going to talk about the energetics of each of these. Now, if you like a particular flavor, that doesn't mean it's off limits. It just needs to be moderated with other cooling herbs. So, first on our list is chamomile. I need my assistant. Pass around the chamomile. I want you to take a look at it. This is what good chamomile looks like. If you look online, you'll see a lot of them with these beautiful little daisy-like flowers. Those are probably chrysanthemums or feverfew or something else like that. True chamomile looks like this, and you'll be able to smell it. Recutita, Matricaria recutita. Okay, just start at this end, then we'll start the next one on the other end. No, they can just pass it around if they want to smell it. So I want you to know,
And typical of it is the part with all the, where the seeds will be, the petals will reflex back when it's dried. And it should look about that color. It's a very pale petal tea. Its energetics are slightly warming. It is an anti-inflammatory, it's antispasmodic, it's a carminative. It's also supportive for allergies, as long as you don't have a sensitivity to the aster family, and you would know that if you did. As a sleep aid and to relax children, I know I saw a happy baby bubble bath one time that was infused with calendula. And the taste is fruity and floral. And it's very pleasant, and you'll see that when you pass it around and get a smell of it. Next, we have rose. Where do you put the rose? Nettles, rose. Now these rose petals, and these are good. Start on that end and pass it back and forth. And again, you'll see that the tea is not intensely colored, but you'll get this great aromatics from it. It's really important to have a lid. You don't want to just brew it in an open cup. If you can, put a saucer on top. Because what you want is you want all of those aromatics to go back into the tea. It's also good for the aromatic ones like chamomile, lavender, and rose to breathe it in a little, because you'll get some volatiles that are coming out in the steam. Rose, and the petals come from basically those three: Rosa gallica, Rosa centifolia, and Rosa damascena. It's also a warming. Actions are uplifting, astringent. You can actually use your leftover tea to wash your face. Sorry, I didn't mean to pat that. Antibacterial, antimicrobial. Some of the constituents are carotenoids, tannins, vitamins A, C, and E. And of course, if it's really hot water, it's probably going to lose some of the vitamin C, but the others are going to be there. And you know citronellol because it's common in a lot of your native Australian plants. Lavender. We got another one. Now, this is a true lavender, Lavandula angustifolia. I've met a lot of people in New South Wales and Queensland who go, oh, I grow lavender, and most of it is either the Spanish lavender or a form that's really high in camphor. And you do not want to make tea out of this. It is not good. But the angustifolia, it'll be cooling, it'll be floral, slightly bitter, which is why it's cooling. Anything that's bitter is also cooling. So this is a great tea for summer. It's fantastic in lemonade. Other side, how's it go? Anti-inflammatory, antispasmodic, it's good for cramping. I made some lavender cordial, just a simple syrup, and then infused lavender in it without boiling the lavender. And I had a roommate who started taking it every time she had a cycle. It's very mild, and you can have it fairly regularly. It's mood uplifting. It's considered to be a nervine. It's supposed to be very relaxing. They used to store linens in lavender so that when they put them on the bed, they would help people relax and go to sleep. They're also supposed to be repellent to bed bugs, so I imagine that also aided the sleep. Calendula. This is an amazing, amazing plant. It doesn't have much scent. It doesn't have much flavor. It does make a lovely golden color. Its energetics are relatively neutral, and so they help to balance out some of the other ones. It's anti-inflammatory. It's a vulnerary. That means it's good for healing wounds, promotes general healing. It helps reduce muscle, antispasmodic, helps reduce muscle spasms. Hepatoprotective, there's recent research showing that it helps protect the liver, and also for people who have menstrual problems, cycles. Noose is relatively neutral. It's the carotenoids that are responsible for a lot of the actions. Lutein and beta-carotene, and you'll notice that's part of where the golden color comes from. Catnip. Now, most of you may be familiar, if at all, with it. It's as something to give to your cat. But catnip tea is a traditional relaxant. In the U.S., the Pennsylvania Dutch people and the Pennsylvania and Ohio areas give it to children to help them sleep. And the children will actually chew fresh leaves like you would chew chewing gum. So it's really nice. And it too will get a slightly yellowish color. Sorry about that. Energetics are warm, relaxing, antiviral, and anti-flatulent. Relaxing it's sort of an aid to sleep. It is not at all a soporific. It doesn't put you to sleep. It just helps you relax. And it's a sort of minty, spicy, grassy kind of smell. I go on. Nettles. Nettles are really amazing. They are super high in nutrients. I would recommend making a nettle tea blend to anyone who is like strictly vegan, because it's one way you can actually boost your vitamin intake. And I'll pass the nutrients around. I updated it, and the constituents are in some of my other flash drive. Here we go. But it's so it's high in vitamins, it's high in essential minerals, it's high in magnesium, it has calcium, a lot of the smaller ones as well, several different vitamins, and it's really, really good support. If somebody's having trouble issues and nutritional issues, it's really, really good for that. There we go. Spearmint. Now, I use spearmint, not peppermint, for these sorts of blends, general usage. Peppermint, even though it's widely available, in large amounts or continuous use can be irritating to someone who's got any kind of ulceration or irritation in the bowels. Spearmint, however, is very, very safe and very compatible. There we go. It blends well with any of the other things. And one thing about all of these is that you can take any random group of 3 and they will go together. Here we go. It's cool. Cool, digestive, antimicrobial, anti-flatulent, minty, and fruity. I may have to pull up my other flash drive later. Horsetail, Equisetum arvense. This is a common roadside plant. Very neutral. It's one of the few sources of water-soluble silica. So it's really good for any kind of urinary irritation in those areas. Vitamins A, B, B5, C, D, flavonoids, antioxidants, saponins, tannins. Saponins sort of speed through the system. Topically, it's good for wounds and burns. It's neutral. It has small amounts of thiaminase. Now, when you make an herb tea, 1, you're using a very small amount to begin with. 2, you're putting it in hot water and then taking it back out again. So the amount of any of these, any things like the thiaminase would be, so minimal as to not be any kind of risk at all. But I want to mention it because some people like to do things in extremes. So they'll put 3 times the amount, let it brew 3 times as long, and take it every day. So that's my only hesitation there. But it's really good for prostate, any kind of urinary tract irritation. Lemon myrtle. Here's one of your native own. I'm trying to add to my collection of herbs from the native plants as I make sure what their constituents are. A lot of the native medicines here are strong medicines, and so it needs to understand how to sort of moderate them and reduce the irritation. And it should look about like that, and your teacup should have just the slightest bit of color, and it'll have a lovely aroma. Bacchausia citriodora, it is warming, so you want to mix it with something like spearmint for the summertime if you're a hot person to begin with. Antibacterial, anti-inflammatory, especially for sore throats. Lemony, pungent. It contains carotenoids. Now this is really good because it contains carotenoids that aid in eye health. So anybody that's getting a lot of sun in their eyes, maybe has a potential for inflammations, drinking tea like this is going to support your body in not succumbing to some of the extremes. Its first commercial use here in Australia was in World War II as a substitute for lemonade. And it makes a great lemonade, especially mixed with some of the other herbs. Lemon balm. Elder, here's the lemon balm. And I don't have the lemon verbena. That's what I've substituted I've substituted your lemon myrtle for lemon verbena, which also can be used. This does make a nice golden color. The taste of the fresh plant is is very different from the other plant, the dried plant. I found that the fresh one is really very floral for me, whereas the dried one is more lemoning. And the name is Melissa officinalis. And lemon balm is known as a mood uplifter. This is the herb, it's called the herb for broken hearts. So the idea is that if you have a good tea would be a mixture of lemon balm and lavender to sort of make it sort of lift your spirits and sort of improve your general mood. Mood, antidepressant, a mild antispasmodic. So you can see it would work really well with the lavender. It's mildly sedative. It reduces stress, and it's considered a cognitive enhancer. So sort of the anti-brain freeze. It's sort of citrusy and floral, and you'll get that when it's passed around. And the constituents, rosmarinic acid, and other compounds which are known to bind to the nicotinic receptors, which actually means that they will prevent things like nicotine from being able to bind to the nicotinic receptors. And muscarinic, from Amanita muscaria. They have multiple functions in the human body. Camellia sinensis. This is the tea of teas. This was the original tea. And it's got pretty flowers. It grows New South Wales. It likes slightly cooler conditions. So if you have a mountain climate or you have a sort of air-conditioned house, you might give it a go. I don't have any power. So what I'm going to say is, so that is the tea that's responsible for both the black and the green teas. Wait for the tech guys to come up. I have a list up there of, you probably know different things like English breakfast and Yunnan. So some of the teas that have a unique flavor are what we call chemotypes, varietals. Teas, black tea, grown in different areas like Yunnan in China or Darjeeling in India, will have different characteristics, different intensity, different bouquet, and it's almost like wine. Figure out what's. And I'm thinking it's. You got it? Okay. Watch the little balls go round and round. Same thing's true with green teas. A lot of the teas, the green teas that you may have heard of, is the varietals. Now these are all good, and if you like caffeine and you don't want to avoid it, you can actually blend some of these other teas along with the green or black tea. I have here a little. This is matcha. I don't know if anyone's ever smelled it or tried it straight. I was totally addicted to it for a while. I used to have matcha with sugar, which is terrible, and ice. This other girl and I, we'd make it at our workplace. But I went to smell. It's very uplifting, and the good thing about matcha, if you use it, is that you get all of the constituents. You get the whole leaf, just like you would with any other herb teas. Somebody want to take this and pass it? Thank you. We'll skip ahead a little bit. So along with the herbs, and you'll notice that all of those were flowers and leaves. There's a different process for making tea out of roots, barks, tubers. So things like cinnamon, dandelion root, even beans, like coffee beans, require a decoction. Decoction is that you actually bring them to a simmer and simmer them for 20 minutes. And they require a little bit of cooking to bring everything out, which is why you've got your stovetop things. There are ways of speeding it up, like a cold press. But you need to actually like to simmer. Licorice root, for example, is something that you simmer for 20 minutes and let sit. If you let it sit overnight, you actually get more of the benefits out of it. Dandelion root is really good. If anybody wants a coffee substitute, this particular product is really nice. It is a combination of dandelion, chicory, and a gluten-free barley. You can pass that around. As far as I know, you can only get it online in Australia. We got it? Yay! Thank you. So, varietals. So black teas got very, so if anybody's ever confused about the differences are, so these are all the ones that are for where they grow, and they do achieve different sort of chemotypes, different chemical compositions. So Assam, Darjeeling, Ceylon, Kimun, Yunnan. Darjeeling is called the champagne of black teas. Flavored teas, that would include Earl Grey, Lady Grey. Chinese restaurant tea usually has jasmine flowers in it, which are also considered to be slightly sedative, and they're also supposed to excite the senses. Constant comment, which is something I get from England, that I like from England, is cloves, cinnamon, and orange peel. A smoked tea is lapsang souchong, and then there are blends. English breakfast is a blend actually of Assam, Keelan, and Kenyan. The green teas, you see these terms. The first flush grown in sunlight, then there you get these types: sencha, genmachai, fukum, mushika, tencha, and matcha. Steamed but not rolled, ground, and then powdered. First flush, covered in shade. Second flush, bitter, and it's drunk to combat bad breath, halitosis. So those different names. You'll see Gyokura. It's covered for 20 days prior to picking to reduce the bitterness, and it's high in theanine, which is the tea correspondent stimulant to caffeine. So there are three main ones: caffeine, theobromine, which is what you get in chocolate, and then theophylline. Yeah. More green tea. Harvesting methods change, whether it's pan-fried, so dragon well and gunpowder tea are both rolled in pans until they curl into little balls. And then there's kuchi cha, and that's basically the leftovers. They throw it in a thing. It would be the equivalent of what the English call postman's tea. It's the leftover stuff from the floor thrown into a bag. It is considered to be very difficult, very medicinal. Teas. Now I've got two seeds here, fennel and anise, and you can see one is cooling and one is warming. I'll pass them around. Feel free to take a pinch if you want to compare them. Fennel, Phoenicium vulgare, is actually an awful weed here, so I would purchase the seeds. I wouldn't plant any. It relieves gas, it's digestive, it helps smooth coughs, and supports lactation. The anise, which is warming, is digestive, also relieves gas, but it supports the prostate. Other seeds, basil seeds, they're often put into your bubble tea things. Black pepper is used, often in chai. Cardamom and coriander. A lot of these will show up in chai blends. And a chai blend is really nothing more than a black tea with some of these seeds and root and bark spices. I have one recipe, but in India, everybody blends their own chai. So part of it is finding the flavors that you like. Some people don't like cloves, so you can leave the clove out and add a little more cardamom if you want. The fruit teas. They really lend themselves well to tea making. I would say only fresh or free-dried fruit. I actually found these in the market. You can pass it out. Sorry to make you get up so much. And these crushed up a little bit in a bit of tea would add that sort of flavor. Warming fruits are peaches, cherries, lychees, fresh or dried strawberries. Neutral ones, believe it or not, pineapple and grapes. And those are cooling ones on the other side. And the key way, if you're not sure, if it's slightly bitter, then it's going to be a cooling tea. Now, materials. Those are the herbs you can choose from. And what you need to make your own tea is first 3x5 card. And this is very important. And then you get the tea you want and you measure out, say, half a cup into a bowl. And then you take a secondary tea and you say, well, I want the flavors to be even. I want half and half. And you put that in the bowl. Mix it up, make a cup of tea, taste it, and see how it is. If you like it, then you write down half a cup each, and then you save it. Because I guarantee you, if you put it into a bag or put it into a can, you will forget the proportions, and it's very difficult to find them again. So once the tea's made up, you've got to formulate, before that, the seeds I mentioned. So seeds, citrus peel are nice added into teas for flavoring. When you're doing, making your up bags, and that's what I'm going to show you a little bit today, you can get these tea sacks online, and I'll have some resources for you. You put your flowers and leaves in first, and then you put a small amount of whichever seeds or peels that you want, and then you seal it up. If you try to put the seeds into the big bowl, they will all settle onto the bottom and not be evenly distributed. So this is it's why making individual bags is a good thing. So you then bag up your tea, and you want to tie it. I have this lovely organic string. Now you can tie it lightly. These particular bags, while they're meant to be biodegradable, are actually sturdy enough to be reused. If you're really serious about one tea that you're using all the time, you can make up little cotton or silk bags, as long as they're slightly porous, and use the same technique. So can I pass the bag and the bit of string? Now, another important part, we have the record of the formula. Then we would need identification for the tea. If you make more than one, you'll forget which one is which. I make up these tags and tie them to this particular tea. This is my rose mint tea, but it actually contains all the colors. So it's got calendula, which is yellow, roses, which are red, spearmint, which is green, and cornflower, which is blue. And it makes a nice cup that actually is very reminiscent of regular tea. If you pass. You'll see I have my complete formula on the back, the constituents, so I know which one it is. And I printed out a little image there. Dover is an American publisher who has an online site where you can sign up and you'll get samples, and you're able to download for free images from different things as they come up each month. So I download them and save them and use them on all my teas. Here's another one. I made a massage oil. It shows a knight in shining armor, and it's a sandalwood massage oil. Pass it around. Now I checked here at Woodford, another option. Cardstock is what I use for the labels. You can use paper, but it's much more fragile, and if it gets slightly damp, it will disintegrate. This will handle a little bit of splashing without any problems. Woodford here, they have little labels. You can actually make a stamp, and then you cut it out. Hole punch. I love the hole punch. It makes putting labels on things so much easier. And the tea bag I'm passing around, this is a particular company. There's another one called Tea Sack, which is also good. They come with a little flap at the top. You don't have strings on it, and I think they're less expensive than ones that come with strings. Now, see. Ta-da! So when you choose your tea, this is the procedure. I actually wrote it all down here on a card. You pick your primary action, your primary flavor, and you pick 1 to 3 supportive ones, and you can then test it, try it, and then adjust it as you see fit. I've made up, since normally I do this as a workshop and people take the tea home with them. I have all the bowls with all the things in the bags would be in big bowls, and I would help people, sort of adjust their teas and all that. So what I've done is I've made up a little introductory kit which has the cards, the string, a couple of tea bags, and all of the documentation. I'll pass this around. You can take a look at it. I got this one. On one side is a summary of the actions and all the plants that we use today. And on the other side is the basic instructions on how to do them. I think we're doing good. No, this is the one, this is the wrong flash drive. So, Austral herbs, Austral, herbs in Australia, is the source for most of those ones I passed around. Very high quality. You can see the color. It's vibrant. There's no extra materials in it. These are things you want to look for in teas that you buy. Be really cautious if you go to buy a flower tea and there's lots of stem bits in it. Calendula you can get as pure petals. You can also get it as whole blossoms. The whole blossoms tend to be cheaper, but it will still work really well. That's the thing. And the last one said, thank you. It's not there, so that's it. So that's it. I'm ready if anybody has any questions. Yes?
Okay, so you said you're a gardener.
Yes.
Do you grow your own herbs, and how do you dry them for tea making?
So you would grow them for tea making, you would grow them organically, you would not use any sprays, and you would try not to use any fertilizers. I fully believe that things shouldn't be monoculture, so I like to have my herbs mixed in with other herbs. I grew a lot in the States. I actually attended a university herb garden for a couple of years. Here, right now, we're staying with my partner's aunt in Brisbane for 6 months, and she has a very English rose garden, so there wasn't much room except in pots for a couple of herbs. You can grow them in pots if you have an apartment or a place that doesn't lend itself to, to digging up the yard. If you want to not fertilize most of these plants, most of them do not like too much fertilizer. Chamomile will reseed itself and move around. Catnip is a mint, so it will spread, so you might want to take cautions of that, but it's really easy to grow year round. And another reason why I mentioned of these is because you can get the seeds. Now, my favorite seed source here is Boondie, B-O-O-N-D-I-E, because you can get a little packet for $1, and if it doesn't work out, you don't feel like you've really lost a lot. Most of them you can put right on the ground, but I recommend starting them in a flat. Lavender is a slow one to grow, to get started, but once it does, and that one you have to tend. You really have to keep that cool. I've seen a couple places in New South Wales closer to the mountains where it seems to do really well. It grows well in Tasmania. The one with the little plume at the top, that's your Spanish lavender, and that's the one you don't want to make in tea. It's just too much camphor in it, which isn't really good for your system. Anybody else? Questions? Yes?
Could you tell us about Tulsi?
About what?
Could you tell us about Tulsi?
Tulsi.
Yeah.
So Tulsi is Ayurvedic, and it's very strong. A lot of people like Tulsi. I don't put it in the general one, but if you're used to drinking it, it certainly is something you could put into your blend. So it's relatively safe.
Rama and Krishna. What's the difference?
The doshas?
Rama,
Rama?
Krishna. What's the difference?
Rama, Krishna, Tulsi?
Yeah.
Actually, I'm not familiar with that. That's Ayurvedic. Yeah? Do you know? I'll look it up. If you want to leave your number, I will get back to you on that one. She asked what the difference between Rama, Krishna, Tulsi is. Since it's not bisexual, it's got to do something with either pre-flowering. My guess is that it's pre-flowering, post-flowering. So that would be it. Anybody else have a question? Yes?
Yes, there's one here. Over here, on your right, front row. Front row, here you go.
Yeah.
Can I just ask about the temperature of the water? Does that matter? And is it different for the different flowers?
So she's asking
seeds?
about the temperature of the water. So basically, I bring it up to boiling. There's a whole thing in the Japanese tea ceremony, which I studied a little bit, and you want to bring it so that it's just rolling below the surface. As long as it's reached the stage where it's beginning to simmer, you want to pour it over, and that will work for any of your flower and leaf teas. And the seeds also will give up their elements really quickly. If you're doing any of the roots, bark or root and bark, tree seeds, tree plant things, tubers, you need to decoct it. So you actually need to simmer, not boil, because when you boil, the steam goes off, it carries the aromatics with it. So if you do put it in a pot, you want to make sure you put a lid on it so the stuff rolls back in, and you want to bring it to a simmer below the surface so the water is sort of doing a dance like this underneath, but not actually breaking the surface. And I do that for about 20 minutes, and then you turn it off and let it sit, and you'll find out you get a really good, strong tea. American sassafras is like that, dandelion root, cinnamon bark. I wouldn't drink straight cinnamon all the time. A little bit pinch is really good. Anybody else have a question? Yes.
When you dry herbs that you
Yes.
pick up yourself, does
Yes.
it matter if you put them like straight to the sun, or
Yes,
if you rather put them into the shade,
It,
or how?
it matters absolutely. So if you put them direct in the sun's heat, especially here in Australia, is very likely to evaporate some of your essential oils. So you want to dry them in an airy, so where there's air circulation, but shaded.
Okay, thank you. And once you pick teas or you collect teas yourself, how do you store them in the best way?
So the best way to store them is in an insect-proof container. I try to use glass, and you want to keep it in a relatively cool place. Anytime it gets heated up, it's going to be like anything else that's organic. It will decompose over time. It's good if you're growing your own plants, and you have them there. It's good to sort of replenish your stock once a year. You take the old ones that you haven't used and either have a big cook up and share tea with a lot of people, or make potpourri. There's a lot of other uses for it, but you don't want to keep drinking it for tea. Although I have to say, I had sassafras bark I harvested in the US, and it was good for 5 years. And it was better than anything you could purchase. And I'm going to look into the native sassafras here, because there's some of the constituents are very similar in flavor and energetics. Anybody else? Yes?
At what
Yep.
stage do you harvest your blossoms?
What?
At what stage do you harvest like your flowers, like your calendula and stuff? Is it when they first open, or
Yeah.
do you give them a couple
Okay,
days
so
to
when
like,
the blossoms
mature?
open, so this does make a difference. For lavender, you want to harvest them just before the blossoms open. With chamomile, you want to get it when the blossoms are open, before they've all recurved. You don't want, so each one is slightly different. If you need information on growing, you can contact me. I'm happy to share the information I know. But yes, there does make a difference. Calendula you pick when it's fully open. Chamomile, all the asteraceae you pick when they're open. Lavender you pick before the buds open. That's when the phytochemicals are at their strongest. Spearmint you can pick any time because it's constantly growing. I usually cut off the flowers. The flowers will begin to take some of the energy out of the plant. So you keep pruning the flowers off with that. Same thing with basil. So if you're growing holy basil, you have to do the same thing. And then you harvest the leaves, dry them. I often put them in a little paper sack, like the little paper lunch packs, and you can hang them up and pin them with a clothespin. They usually dry, especially in Australian climates, in about a week. And you'll see when you crunch it, it's crunchy. If you're doing your home harvest and you have a lot, you can use an old pillowcase. You put all the leaves in the pillowcase, hang it in a closet so it's out of the sun, shake it up, grab it by the bottom and shake it up about once a day until everything's all crunchy. And that's a really good way of drying them that way. Yep.
If you live in a colder, wetter country, can you dry things another way, like in the oven?
I'm not sure.
Is there another way of drying plants that isn't outside? Can you dry them in ovens or something like that?
I don't recommend drying them in ovens because the oven is going to allow it to vaporize. Same thing with microwave drying. Microwave drying is really for when you want to make press pictures. It's really not good for the energetics of the plant. I would recommend small amounts to do them in paper sacks. Just make sure that when you get more than one, you label the name on each one, because a lot of these, particularly the leaves, even some of the petals, when they're totally dried, will be not easy to distinguish from one another. Anybody else? In back here? That's my partner raising his hand.
You mentioned about that you have some little kits that you make up.
Some
Can you
what?
explain exactly what's in those tea-making
Yes,
kits?
I did mention the kits,
Uh,
so they're up
and-
at the
and where you can
festival
get them?
shop if anybody wants to know. They're very rudimentary. It just has a sample of 6 tea bags, some string, the tags. I punched all the holes in them myself. It will have each of these. It'll have one of these, do it yourself. It'll have the herbs on the other side, and a brochure on the different ways to infuse the teas, and a little bit about history. Since I couldn't work with everybody individually to make your own, I figured get start this way, and anyone who wants to contact me, I'm happy to give them more information. So Anything else?
And just a comment on the Tulsi. It's a
Andrew likes Tulsi.
or holy basil, as it's also known that you mentioned. I think there are different chemotypes. In other words, has different levels of constituents. One of them's high in
So which one is?
eugenol, like
right.
has a clove. Some of them are more sweet, like linalool. And so I think those names, Rama, Krishna, etc.,
Refer to the chemotypes.
are to do with the individual chemotypes of the.
Andrew
of
did the essential oil distillation yesterday, and he is a botanist and herbalist in his own right, and knows more about. He likes Tulsi. I don't use Tulsi myself, which is one reason why I don't know as much about it. It's also a little stronger than any of these teas. And my recommendation is work with these. If you need something stronger, if you have a medical condition, please see an herbalist. And then if you come up with something that you need, then feel free to grow that, but follow some of the guidelines. Because some of the herbs, they're meant to be supportive through a particular illness, but they're not meant to be something, the medicinal ones, a lot of the stronger ones, are not meant to be taken every day for the rest of your life. You can drink lavender tea, though, every day. You can drink chamomile, you can drink spearmint, and you won't have any bad side effects. No more questions? Thank you very much. All right, I went on my